Okay, great. So now we can go on. Dinesh, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, gracias, Fernando. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for being here today. First of all, can everybody hear me okay? I know you can't all respond, but Fernando, that sounds okay?
Yes, it seems to work
Okay,
properly. Yeah, and
great.
people through the chat are confirming. Thank you.
Great, great. Well, thanks to all this international audience, and thank you all for being virtually here today. It's really a testament to the technology that's available that we can do this. This is normally about a 1.5 to 2 hour presentation, but we have a much more limited time frame today. So I'm going to go through this presentation. It's a shortened version of the full presentation, and we're going to go through some things very quickly. But just to reassure you that a fuller version of the slides that you're going to be seeing, as well as a lot more information, is all available online. And I'm going to show you all that, where that all is later on. So not to worry, if I skip over some sections, all of that will be available, and I'll show you exactly where you can access that information later on. Okay, so we'll start with the legal documents project that we've been doing with RETScreen. The primary purpose of this is to raise awareness of legal issues around clean energy projects. It's to outline key legal documents that are used in clean energy projects, and then also introduce participants to this newly developed RETScreen legal documents toolkit. Okay. Now, if we had more time, we would get into a little bit of a discussion about what legal barriers are vis-a-vis clean energy projects. But we'll just say that, and I'm sorry, before I continue, let me just say that this is actually meant as a general overview of legal aspects. It's not a technical training for legal professionals, so we may have some lawyers in the audience, but just so that you all know, it's not a legal training. Okay, it's just a general overview. So the focus of this project is really on the legal barriers and on reducing the legal barriers to clean energy projects. Okay, when we say there are significant legal barriers to clean energy projects, what do we mean by that? Well, very quickly, there's many things we can talk about, but the basic things that we mean when we say that there are legal barriers are, first of all, the cost of developing suitable documents, the lack of knowledge about legal requirements for clean energy projects, and also insufficient capacity amongst lawyers and law firms to develop clean energy documents. Okay, and we'll get into this a little bit more later. Legal documents for a clean energy project have to be appropriate. Okay, and by appropriate we mean that they need to contain the necessary elements for the type of project that we'll be engaging in. And so this could be either a renewable energy project, renewable power, energy efficiency, cogeneration, heating and cooling, etc. So they need to be appropriate to that type of project. They need to be comprehensive in the sense that they need to anticipate, insofar as possible, all the legal situations and issues that may arise. And this, of course, balances cost versus time. And they need to be customized. They need to be tailored to your specific project and also to your specific jurisdiction. And again, I'll discuss this in the upcoming slides. And costs. Costs are really the focus of this project in terms of reducing legal costs. The costs on an average project can range from tens to hundreds of thousands, to millions of dollars. Okay, so, and the cost obviously depends on the size of the project, the complexity of the project, and the jurisdiction. Risk, and you'll see a little photograph there of some workers in a rather risky situation. The legal aspects of a clean energy project are really fundamentally about identifying, managing, and mitigating risk. Okay, so this is something that you need to keep in mind throughout this presentation and whenever you're thinking about what the legal aspects are of a clean energy project. And also, shielding from liability is a very big issue. Shielding the personnel involved, the owners and the directors and the employees, and also shielding the company more generally. Okay. And again, I'm not going to get into this too much. When we talk about shielding from liability, there's primarily two ways to do that. First of all, of course, is the appropriate due diligence in planning and implementing your project. And secondly, there's the whole issue of insurance, which again we won't get into, but I simply mentioned that. And then that, of course, is mentioned further and discussed further in the materials that I will introduce to you. So before we go on any further with the legal documents, I'll just go through quickly what is RETScreen. Many of you in our audience are probably familiar with RETScreen, so we won't spend a lot of time on it. Okay, but in short, RETScreen helps you make a decision on whether or not a proposed clean energy project makes financial sense. Okay, it is, in our estimation and in the estimation of many around the world, it's the world's preeminent clean energy decision-making software. We have, as of now, more than 210,000 users in every country and territory in the world, used by more than 200 educational institutions, including some of the top universities in the world, for teaching and for research on clean energy. It is now available in 35 languages, covering more than 2/3 of the world's population. Okay. And so far it has been responsible for approximately, well, actually not even approximately, it's probably well over now $4 billion in user savings to date, okay, as a direct result of using RETScreen. And of course, it is provided completely free of charge with no strings attached by the Government of Canada. All right, and that's just a picture there, a screenshot of RETScreen with our Hindi interface. So for those of you who are from India, I know we have several participants from India. It's available in several Indian languages. It's available in, well, again, as I said, 35 languages in total. Okay, and it's the languages can switch at the click of a button. Very convenient. Okay, so now we'll get more into the actual legal documents project, which is the focus of our presentation. Okay, so the project goal is really to help reduce legal barriers by, first of all, making the legal requirements of a clean energy project more accessible. Okay, so that project developers understand, well, what is required in the legal sense when one is doing a clean energy project. Secondly, bringing together sample legal documents freely available over the internet that can be used as templates, examples, or customized. Now, I don't think, and I'm maybe not be technically savvy enough to know if I can show you a live internet example here, but I certainly have some screenshots that I can show you of that, and then you can certainly look at those on your own time. Thirdly, developing new documents for public use where none exist, and those include some very important finance documents, which I will be showing you. This legal documents project is essentially completed. We are now at the stage of promoting the tools that we've developed to stakeholders such as yourselves. Okay, and of course the project is led by RETScreen International, which is a division of the Government of Canada. We have a partnership with the Energy and Environment Foundation, which is a non-governmental organization based in Washington. And their main contribution has been some excellent content that's been given to us, developed pro bono by lawyers from leading firms in New York and Washington. And of course, financially supported by REEEP, and we're very grateful for that. Okay, so I keep saying we're going to get to it, we're going to get to it. Let us get to the actual toolkit. What is the toolkit that we've developed, and what are the tools that you can use? First of all, there are the legal aspects web portals, okay, which you'll see at the websites there, www.retscreen.net and Energy Environment Foundation. Okay, all of the information, the slide presentations, the documents, the legal chapter, etc., are all going to be available on the web portal. It's available within version 4 of the software within the RETScreen user manual. So when you download RETScreen, you have access to all of this without the internet. It's available within the software itself. There's an e-textbook chapter and training slides. So for example, the presentation that I'm doing, there is a fuller version of the presentation available, which you can use for your own training purposes. You are free to adapt all of our training material that's available online. We ask only that you credit RETScreen International and provide our website, but you're free to use all of our very extensive training materials. And the chapter is going to go into much more detail. It's about a 30-page document that actually goes through in much more detail what I'm going through right now with you. And there's a legal discussion forum through the Energy and Environment Foundation website. And this is primarily meant for lawyers to collaborate on developing new documents. Okay, so let's get into some of the, let's actually get into some of the issues now. Now that I've introduced what the project is, what RETScreen is, let's get into some of the issues. Now, I am not going to go through the documents in detail. I'm going to introduce some of the documents that we have, but I'm going to spend a little bit more time on some of the overarching framework issues. I think because this is meant more as a general training rather than a specific legal training, I hope that the audience will appreciate this a little bit more. It just gives you a sense of what are the overarching considerations that you need to consider when you're developing a legal strategy. So probably the majority of you in our audience don't need to be convinced of the importance of legal counsel and having a proper legal strategy and sufficient legal resources. Okay, and I'll just go again through this quickly. Why do we need proper legal counsel for clean energy projects? Energy-related legal agreements can be very complex. Okay, for example, just one of the power purchase agreements on our websites, one of the example runs to nearly 120 pages. Another power purchase agreement from Sri Lanka is almost 100 pages. So it's not just American documents that are very long and complex. It's it's the sign of a well-drafted and well-developed document. And those documents can literally cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to develop one document. Clean energy law is highly dynamic in the sense that it is changing quickly. It is developing and changing very quickly. Differing interests and power imbalances. What I mean by this is that no matter how cooperative the spirit may be when one is developing a clean energy project, and there's a certain feel-good aspect to it, it is still fundamentally a business negotiation. Okay, and there are power imbalances, particularly when you have, let's say, a homeowner who's putting in a PV system on his or her roof, versus negotiating with the utility company for interconnection. So certainly, legal counsel is necessary there to address that balance. And transfer of risk, I'll just say this quickly. Some of my fellow lawyers may not appreciate this, but lawyers, like many other professionals, are covered by professional liability insurance. So when you engage proper legal counsel and they have done their job properly, if there are any errors or omissions that could be very expensive errors or omissions in terms of the project, some of that risk goes back to the lawyer and the law firm. So if there have been mistakes made in the legal documentation, that's often covered by the lawyer's professional insurance. So again, there's a transfer of that risk, and risk we mentioned is a very fundamental aspect of all of this. Okay. By the way, I see that people are sending in comments, and I'm trying to refrain from looking at them so I can focus on my presentation. But I believe that we do have about 15 minutes for questions afterwards. And I've also told Fernando that I am available after 10 o'clock. So if any of you want to stay here and discuss somewhat, I am available for some time after 10 o'clock. So not to worry. So we're going to spend some time now on the legal framework, and what we mean by that is this is the sort of overarching, again, legal considerations, okay, that you need to keep in mind when you're developing a clean energy project. The depth and the breadth of the legal advice that you're going to need depends on many of these factors, and I'm going to talk about some of these factors. First of all, it's your role in the project, okay? The legal aspects that we're discussing primarily assume that the user is a project developer. However, there are numerous other potential roles which could have differing legal interests. For example, one could be a landowner leasing land to the project, one could be a financier, one can be a purchaser of electricity, one can be an ESCO or an energy services company for energy efficiency projects. So really the role in the project is going to specifically determine what your legal strategy is going to be. The type of project, it can refer to many different things. It can refer to on or off-grid projects. We can look at broad categories like energy efficiency, renewable energy, cogeneration, heating and cooling. And by the way, there's a whole section in the overview paper that discusses the specific legal aspects of these different technologies. When we take the broad category, we can narrow that down further. So, for example, renewable energy, we can talk about a different type of renewable technology. So wind, solar, geothermal, biomass, biofuels, hydro, ocean power. And then we can narrow that down even further. So let's say even within something like ocean power, there are different modalities of creating the projects. You have tidal power, wave power, ocean currents, ocean thermal energy conversion, etc. So it's very important to know exactly what type of project you're doing, as that's going to significantly impact upon what your legal strategy is going to be. The scale of the project. Well, obviously, a large power plant with numerous customers spread out over multiple jurisdictions is going to have much more legal complexity than a homeowner looking to install, a hot water system, a solar hot water system in their house. So again, something needs to be taken into consideration. And timing a project, it's this is something that's often, not given short shrift, and to the detriment of those who do so. Having a good handle on timing is directly related and critical to the financial viability of the product. So it's not just, well, we have to make sure we get things done in time. This will directly impact a project's bottom line. Some documents, like a power purchase agreement, are known to take a long time to develop and negotiate. Regulatory issues can take a tremendous amount of time. So if you don't have a realistic notion, an evolving notion of how long steps are going to take, it can quickly throw off your financial projections. It can mean the difference between a project that is viable and not viable. So again, this is all part of the legal strategy that you need to develop for your project, all of these considerations. And I'll speak a little bit more. I'm spending more time on this, and I hope this is useful to all of you, because I think it's important to have this general context before we get into specific documents. So the legal environment, okay? The legal environment consists of obligations and considerations. Obligations are really legal requirements over which one really has very little control. Okay, so this could mean compliance with commercial or contract law, securing various permits, adhering to regulations, etc. So again, there's not much control over that. You just need to determine what are the legal obligations and make sure that you follow them, because if you do not, you will not be in compliance, and that could cause a lot of difficulty. Considerations are more elective legal aspects, in the sense that one needs to decide which documents need to be part of your project and how should those be designed. What should the content of those documents be? There is some latitude in this. For example, do you need a power purchase agreement? Do you need an interconnection agreement? For this, you need a careful assessment and strategy so that omissions do not occur. And also conversely, so that you do not overcommit resources on unnecessary legal steps. So if you determine that perhaps a document is not necessary, you may save yourself a significant amount of money and time by not developing that document, or by folding that document into another document. And I'll speak about that also, in the sense that certain documents can sort of incorporate different legal documents within this, especially things like power purchase agreements. Jurisdiction and paramountcy, it's a very important point. It's a simple point, but very important. It's essentially the geographic application of laws. And again, apologies to those of you who have some legal training. You obviously know this very well, but this is meant, again, as a general training. I'm trying to give a general overview here. I won't spend a lot of time on it. But we're speaking jurisdiction specifically in terms of content, so different laws, but also form, so different systems of law. There's common law versus civil law, customary, statutory, etc. Parts of the same country, different parts of the same country can have differing, mutually exclusive, or even conflicting laws. Okay, so that's very important to take note of. And the notion of paramountcy is simply, I'll mention it quickly, is that in the case of a conflict of laws within countries, like intra-country, so within a country's jurisdictions, so let's say a state and the federal law differ, or the provincial and federal law differ, normally there is some sort of guidance for which law takes precedence, which law applies. Okay, so you need to be aware of that too. And international law, we could do an entire seminar just on international law, and perhaps at some point we will. But guidance, what we need to know about this is primarily there's three things that we need to know. First of all, guidance can be provided to your clean energy project by various international treaties, conventions, and covenants. What is really a primary concern are any legally binding obligations that are created through the ratification of an international law document by a national government. That's a mouthful. What that means is that if your country has ratified the Kyoto Protocol and has enacted national legislation, that international covenant has now become applicable to you in that country. Okay, technically it's no longer the international covenant because it's now become a national law, but that's what you need to remember. And the third point I'll make about international law is that even in the absence of binding international obligations, voluntary compliance can make the project eligible, or your project eligible, for financial incentives. Okay, so even if you do not need to follow the dictates of international customs or covenants, voluntarily adhering to those could be financially beneficial. So, for example, there are various mechanisms under the Kyoto Protocol for developing countries. So I hope that's useful to keep in mind. And I'm just giving you now a screenshot of one of the sections. You'll see there Let me see here. I believe I have a pointer. Okay, I think you can all see that pointer now. You'll see here the legal aspects of clean energy project. This is on the RETScreen. You go under training course and under legal aspects of energy projects, and then under there's a drop-down menu with all the different documents. So real property, green leases, finance, etc. This is a screenshot of the different finance agreements that are available. Okay. And you'll see there that there are many different types of documents. They have the number of pages, the jurisdiction, again that very important word, where we're from. So these are primarily from the USA, I believe, and also if they're in Word or PDF, and that's important because the Word documents can be easily modified and used as templates. So this is really the heart of the project, this project legal documentation. And what we do is we are providing documents which are publicly available on the internet. We're providing documents which are less well known, documents that are more specific to clean energy projects, and those whose development may entail higher transaction costs. So we're not trying to do everything here. What we're trying to do is break down the barriers to clean energy projects. Okay, so the documents are specific to that goal of breaking down the barriers. Particularly useful, in our opinion, are those documents which are meant to be used as templates. I.e., for example, there are several documents from CARICOM, and I believe this one here, this construction and term loan agreement, is from CARICOM. That's the Caribbean community, where they've actually developed documents that are meant to be templates. Also very important and useful documents are those that are annotated. So the actual clauses have commentary on each of the clauses, and it explains why the clause is there. So those are very, very useful documents, especially for legal drafting teams. And also red line versions, in particular in the green lease. I'll show you that afterwards. I'll speak about it afterwards. But there's a red line version that shows how a normal commercial lease has been changed to a green lease and exactly what's been put in and what's been taken out. So those are, again, very, very important, I think, in terms of using these documents. And there's just a larger screenshot there of the overall portal, the legal aspects of energy projects, and you'll see there that you can see the e-textbook guides. These are all the different documents. Let me see if I can go down here a little bit more. No, I can't go down. But anyway, you'll see there's also the training materials, so the presentation slides, etc. They're all there. Okay, so let's get into some of the documents. I think I'm doing okay for time here, so I'm going to keep watching. I have about 9:20 on my watch, on my clock here in Canada. By the way, thanks to all of you. I know some of you are in, it's nighttime for you. I believe we have some people from East Asia, China, I know from India for sure. So thank you all for taking the time to, to be here. Okay, so real property agreements, all right. And what do we mean by real property agreements? Let me just get this here. Okay. All right, this is a broad category of documents that are related to the physical land and or facilities that will be involved in the project. Okay, and I'm not going to speak about this too much. I'm going to skip over this one actually because their real property agreements are usually not specific to clean energy projects. They can certainly be modified for clean energy projects. So for example, on our website we have a few examples of annotated wind agreements. So they're basic land lease agreements, but they're annotated for wind energy projects, which can be, again, very, very helpful to you. I am going to say a little bit about green leases, though. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of green leases. It's a fairly new, it's a fairly recent innovation in commercial leasing. It started out, I believe, in Canada and Australia, and it's spreading quickly all around the world. What it is, in brief, is it's either a new lease or a modification to an existing lease that takes into account various environmental considerations. And this includes greenhouse gas emissions, energy consumption, water conservation, solid waste production and disposal, use of environmentally friendly materials and products, etc. So it's basically a normal commercial lease viewed through an environmental lens. And again, we have a good example on our website from the Real Property Association of Canada. They have a national standard green lease template that they've developed, as well as a red line version which shows the changes from a normal commercial lease. So this is something that's going to be spreading around the world, and primarily because you know, commercial buildings can be very environmentally unfriendly, and also commercial leases can last for a very long time. So I think this is something that you're going to see. If you haven't heard about it now, it's good that you have been exposed to it because it'll probably be coming soon. Okay, let's get to the next category, which is regulatory and permitting. And energy projects are subject to oversight from at least one level of government, okay? And these issues are highly specific to jurisdiction. They're less likely to involve negotiated legal agreements. Okay, and again, I'll just go through that quickly. Regulatory issues are obligations to either perform or refrain from performing an action, and permitting is the formal approval process given by a level of government to engage in a particular activity or action. Okay? Actually, I just realized we want to keep time for questions, so I don't have as much time as I thought. So I'm going to go through these a little bit faster here. But again, not to worry. All of this is available. You will be able to go through it afterwards. Power purchase agreement is a very important document. It's fundamentally an agreement for the purchase and sale of electricity. Probably the central legal document in a clean power project. Again, depending on the size of the project. Not all projects generating clean power will have a power purchase agreement. And it can be very complex. It can take a long time to negotiate. It's often a precondition to financing. And also, it can be a comprehensive document. So the power purchase agreement can actually include an interconnection agreement, transmission agreements, net metering, the purchase and sale of environmental attributes, etc. We have numerous documents on our website from countries such as Russia, Sri Lanka, France, US, Canada, ranging from 9 pages to 117 pages. So there's a lot of good examples there for you. Energy performance contracts. This is a key document for energy efficiency projects. It's also a means of financing energy efficiency projects. And it's primarily an agreement to make energy-saving capital or operational improvements to a building or industrial facility. The role of ESCOs is very important here. ESCOs are energy service companies. And these are usually private businesses that undertake to make its customers' facilities more energy efficient. And the ESCO actually develops and finances these energy efficiency projects. And that segues into this results or performance-based contracting, which is a real hallmark of energy performance contracts. What that means is that normally the ESCO will finance all or part of the capital improvement, and in exchange they will take a percentage of the energy savings. So really the customer normally doesn't have to do anything up front. They'll enter into a contract with the ESCO. The ESCO will complete all the capital improvements, and there will be a guarantee for cost savings. So really it's an incentive for the ESCO to do as good a job as possible because their profit is directly tied to this. And again, we have a couple of very useful annotated agreements on our website for energy performance contracts. Design, engineering, procurement, fuel supply, construction, O&M. That's quite a mouthful. It's an unwieldy title, but essentially these are the agreements that are needed to engineer and build the project. Okay, procure necessary equipment and fuel, and also keep the facility operating. So I'm going to, there we go, there are a broad suite of documents to build and run the project. I'll just speak about a couple of aspects. There's a lot of things involved in here. BOT and BOOT agreements. BOT stands for Build, Operate, Transfer, and BOOT is Build, Own, Operate, Transfer. And again, this is sort of another way of financing a facility. It's related to an energy services contract, actually. Energy performance contract, sorry. Wherein the contractor finances and constructs a facility and then operates and owns it for a certain number of years until costs are recovered and a profit is realized. And those are defined into the agreement. So there may be an actual dollar value assigned, or it may be a percentage value assigned. So it's a very interesting way of getting projects built. Fuel supply and related agreement. These are important particularly for projects like cogeneration, projects involving biomass, biofuels, etc. A fuel supply agreement ensures an adequate supply of fuel. And related agreements to a fuel supply agreement are things like offtake agreements and hedging agreements and resource acquisition agreements. And I'm not going to speak about tendering right now, but again, you can go and you'll be able to find a section of that in the materials. Interconnection agreement. Essentially, just breaking it down to its basic definition, it secures a right to feed generated electricity into the local grid, into the utility grid. Okay. It's often integrated into a power purchase agreement. And sometimes where the transmission agreement is different from the interconnecting utility, one may need a separate transmission agreement. And I know this is the case in our local jurisdiction in Ontario. Okay, environmental. Again, these are all large topics, but the purpose of this is simply to give you an overview. So we're just going to go through this, just give you some basic points. Environmental impact assessment. This is now normally mandatory in most countries, but again, it's going to depend on the size of the project. So most places, most jurisdictions will have something like, if the project is under, 1 megawatt, it doesn't need an environmental impact assessment. If it's over a certain amount, or there's a sort of a various degree of rules and regulations as to whether or not the environmental impact assessment applies or not. And it can be a long process and it can be an expensive process. So something to keep in mind. Emissions trading agreements. These are contracts between a seller and buyer of carbon. So it's sort of like carbon. I mean, another people normally call it carbon trading. Between a seller and buyer of carbon or other greenhouse gas emissions like nitrous oxides or sulfur dioxides. And then environmental attributes trading agreements. Clean energy projects produce two commodities. First of all, they produce either clean energy or energy savings. But secondly, they also produce another commodity, which has now become a commodity, and that is the environmental advantages or emissions benefits associated with the project. So it's very interesting because these sort of nebulous environmental benefits have now assumed the status of a tradable commodity, and often these are codified in the form of renewable energy certificates, etc. Complicated topic, but the main points to note really are that these are regulatory constructs, okay, by various jurisdictions. They're subject to change. They arise as a byproduct of energy savings or clean energy production. They're primarily on the voluntary market right now, but that could quickly change. There may be mandatory markets coming into place in various jurisdictions. But most critically, I think the most important point is that these may have a cash value. So emissions trading and environmental attributes trading can be critical to the financial viability of a project. So again, this is something that it's a side effect. It's a byproduct of your clean energy project, but it can contribute directly to your project's bottom line. And then we have other legal and quasi-legal issues. We will not discuss these in detail, but I'm just going to go through some of them. We have the corporate structure, for example, the considerations in terms of determining your clean energy project's corporate structure is shielding a project and its owners primarily from liability, and then also taxation of income. And there are many different ways that one can structure a clean energy project: special purpose vehicle, a limited liability company, a corporation, cooperative, partnership, etc. Monitoring, targeting, and verification is another issue. Intellectual property, for example, if if a project employs a new technology or a new process that's worthy of protection, it's something you're going to want to look into, probably before you build the project. Dispute resolution can be put into other legal documents, or you can have a separate overarching legal dispute resolution document. Decommissioning. Labor, this probably comes in at the construction phase of the project. Okay. Indigenous peoples and ethnic minorities, again, quasi-legal, but could these are all things that could be very big issues, or they could not be. But if they are issues, they can really have a major impact on the project. The NIMBY factor, I'll just mention that quickly. NIMBY is an acronym which refers to Not in My Backyard. I think many of you probably know that. But basically, everybody wants clean energy, but nobody wants to look at wind turbines. So again, it's something that's minor, but it's something that could derail a project. You have a well-organized group of residents, wealthy residents who live on the shore, and they don't want to see windmills. They don't want to see wind turbines from outside of their expensive windows. So again, these are things that one needs to keep in mind as one is developing a legal strategy. I'm going to speak a little bit now about finance, project finance. That's our basic equation. We have a legal strategy plus appropriate, properly done project documentation that is going to give you financing. Okay, and we're talking about, these are for all non-cash projects. Obviously, I mean there are certain projects which are small enough, or with the company has sufficient resources that they can do it in cash. These are for all of those other projects, which is probably the vast majority of them that are going to require financing. Project finance is a critical aspect of most clean energy projects, and it's something that oftentimes the designers and the engineers perhaps don't take enough consideration of. One can have a great idea, a wonderful solar resource or a wind resource or etc., but if there's no money, the project is not going to get off the ground. Okay. Um, Normally, one needs to have the legal aspects in place, for example, a suitable power purchase agreement, before a reputable lender is going to advance funds to you. There's several ways of engaging in financing. We've already mentioned ESCOs, for example, the energy service companies and energy performance contracts. We've mentioned bought and boot agreements. There are things that one can do. For example, equity financing. There is debt financing. There are public-private partnerships. Equity and debt, probably most of you know about. Public-private partnership, again, as the name implies, is usually a funding partnership between the government and private sectors, and that actually can include things like bought and boot schemes. I want to spend some time on this slide here, the government-linked financing, because there's a lot of important points. These include financial incentives and legislated incentives, and you have to check for these in whatever jurisdiction you're in, because it's a fast-changing and fast-developing market. What do we mean by government-linked financing? Okay, these are things that are creations of various levels of government, primarily to encourage the development of clean energy projects. So financial incentives are creations of government which help ensure a project's financial viability. It could include tax incentives, and there are various kinds of tax incentive: indirect and direct subsidies, import duty concessions, rebates, sales tax exemptions. There are a huge number of different types of incentives that can be done. The main point with tax incentives is that tax incentives can become a major part of project revenue. Which is up to 1/2 or 2/3 of the total project revenue, particularly in the initial years. So please do not, give this less credit than it deserves. I mean, a tax incentive, a proper tax incentive, can really mean the difference between a project that proceeds and one that does not proceed. Okay. Net metering is a mechanism whereas the owner of a renewable energy generation system receives credit for a portion of the electricity generated. So essentially, the customer's meter runs both forwards and backwards. And you pay only for the net amount of energy that's used. Now, this is more at the consumer level because larger projects will usually have some sort of power purchase agreement as opposed to net metering, but it can also be for small businesses and industries. It's widespread in many Western jurisdictions. I know, for example, Ontario, British Columbia, many American states, and I'm sure it's prevalent in many other countries too. Legislated incentives. Again, it's hard to separate. I mean, I've tried to separate these into categories, but they really all run together. So just keep that in mind. They're not strict categories. Legislative incentives are where the government really is creating an enabling environment for clean energy. Again, it's directly related to the financial viability of the project. RPS and EEPS refers to Renewable Portfolio Standards or Energy Efficiency Portfolio Standards. And essentially, RPS is a policy which requires increased production of renewable energy, or it requires electric utilities to meet a specified percentage of their electricity purchases with electricity produced from renewable sources. So it's really the government creating an environment wherein there has to be increased renewable energy produced, or utilities have to purchase a certain percentage of their electricity from renewable sources, and that can be a significant boost to the market. And the sort of a similar logic with the energy efficiency portfolio standards, where energy providers have to meet a portion of their energy demand or annual increase in energy demand through greater energy efficiency. Feed-in tariffs, I'm sure many of you are aware of feed-in tariffs. You've heard of it. Again, it's something that requires electrical utilities to purchase renewable energy at above market rates. And again, it's to spur the development of the market. So it's expanding rapidly. It's in many different countries: in Germany, the UK, Australia, the US. Ontario had a particular regime called the REEEP. It has now changed. It's now the feed-in tariff. That's part of the new Green Energy Act. So again, I'm just trying to emphasize that these things are changing quickly, and one has to really, keep abreast of the latest developments. Okay, so we'll get into now typical financial documentation. Again, the overall purpose of financial documentation is to provide incentive to the lenders to advance monies, and provide security to the lender for monies advanced. So there's a simple dichotomy there, which I think makes a lot of sense. Security, of course, is the key, as is the management of risk. Now, we have had some important documents developed for us by the Energy and Environment Foundation. These are available online. Let me just see here. Some of these documents are actually quite comprehensive, and as I've mentioned, they've been very expensive documents to develop. The finance documents are approximately $150,000 each if one were to develop such a comprehensive document from scratch. And these ones, you are free to take them as templates and customize them. So for a medium-sized project or a small project, really, it's a tremendous benefit. There are many different kinds of financial documents, though, and again, a lot of these are on our website now as sample documents. There are loan agreements. Loan agreement can be from 3 pages to 300 pages. This is usually the key agreement. But then there's all sorts of ancillary documents, such as a guarantee or security agreement, stock pledge agreements. It's another form of a security agreement. A schedule of definitions. It's not a standalone agreement, but it's very important to the other documents in the suite of financial documentation. Assignment and security agreement, letters of credit, etc. So that's the basic presentation that I have sped through here. What this is showing you is, now unfortunately the resolution is not very good on this one, but there is a chapter, and this is called the Legal Aspects of Energy Projects, the e-textbook chapter, and you'll see all of the various topics that I've covered here, plus a whole bunch of additional topics are now covered in the Legal Aspects of Energy Project chapter. This is about a 27-page detailed overview of the legal considerations in an energy project. It goes into a lot more detail with a lot more content that's presented here. And again, it's on the website. It's also in the software, the latest version of the software if you download that. So what do we conclude then from this whirlwind tour of the legal issues? First of all, legal issues and documents are an important part of any clean energy project, and they can represent a major expense. RETScreen is about breaking down barriers, particularly financial barriers, to the development of clean energy projects. And legal barriers can represent a major expense, so we're trying to reduce those legal barriers. RETScreen has developed tools that will raise awareness of legal issues in clean energy project and reduce transactional legal costs. That is our fervent hope. And project developers and others may experience significant savings by taking advantage of the documents and tools that have been identified and developed. And just to make it very clear, I mean, we have developed the legal toolkit for use by lawyers. I mean, there are certainly things in there that can be used by the general public. There's a lot of very good information. There's a lot of excellent background information, which hopefully you'll find interesting. But in terms of the documents, these are things that, for example, you would, if you're developing a project, you would engage legal counsel, you would direct them to this resource, and they will hopefully send you a bill that is far less than what they would normally do. And I gave this presentation a few days ago, and we had some project developers from California there in the audience, and they actually came up to me and they said, you know, I wish we would have had this earlier, because they had engaged legal counsel. Unfortunately, their legal counsel didn't know exactly how to develop the clean energy legal documents. They wasted a lot of time because they simply didn't have the expertise to go ahead and modify documents for clean energy projects. So had they had this resource at that time, they could have saved a lot of time and a lot of money. And of course, we are lawyers. I'm a lawyer, so we have to have a disclaimer, and the disclaimer has to be in small print. Okay. What this is essentially saying is that this is all for information and awareness purposes. Okay. This is not legal advice, and one should not rely on the information and the documentation here to the exclusion of legal counsel. It's very good information. It's current information. We hope it's very useful, but don't rely on it to the exclusion of legal counsel, because as things change quickly, and we're not making any representations as to this being legal advice. We're not allowed to give legal advice. So with that in mind, if anyone has any questions, you're free to contact me. I will type in my email address here. Visit the RETScreen website, please. Do have a look at our our legal documents section, legal aspects of clean energy projects. we hope that these tools are going to be of use for you. And actually, we're also very interested in feedback. So if you do use the tools, if you would be so kind as to provide me with some feedback as to how you found them in terms of their utility, and also how they could be made more useful, that would be very much appreciated. We are trying to do this for, again, we're trying to do this something that's going to be useful for people, that's going to help enable clean energy. So if you have suggestions that will help us make this better, they are most welcome. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to type in my email address and my phone number in this bar, and hopefully everybody will be able to see it. And I believe we have some time now for questions. Let's do this.